Bots are things, are like the tokens. The tokens have the value we want to give them. A Steam can equal to €1, can equal to zero. It will still be Steam. The same will be with bots. I don't see much problem with bots, except this random whale and booster gods and stuff. That is the socialist approach. We seize all the money, we control all the money, and then we give you crumbles and we're helping you. And that's what is wrong. Voting bots, I use voting bots. I rarely bot myself. I authorize others to use my SP by putting in a trail and following a voting trail or whatever. And these kind of bots are quite beneficial. For this one I've been trying to finish, which will allow people to call it and cast a vote with 10,000 SP that don't belong to them. And this empowers Minos. For the Mino point of view, what is hurting more collaboration philosophy in steemit is this bullshit about curation rewards. When you have less than 500 SP, don't think about curation rewards. Give your tenth of a cent to the author. I think that the selfishness starts from that point where you have nothing and you think you gotta make it last.
If anybody here remembers, there's a few people here that are like veterans like me. Back in the day, I mean, Steam Sports actually did the very same thing. It was very socialist. Everybody piled on to vote for Steam Sports because you got crumbs out of it. You would get a tiny of reward from it, but they got a huge reward, basically, and they controlled the whole money supply because there was such an incentive to vote for them just to get that tiny little bit of money out of it. You know, it's the exact same thing. It's funny how these socialist systems keep jumping out of it at us from the rules that we have set in place. That worked because we had a different curve at the time. It wasn't the linear curve, it was the n squared or whatever curve, so each vote was exponentially larger than the last. Steemit has a habit of falling into these socialist structures. This is kind of like anarchy, right? That's why we have so many anarchists on the platform. The fact that there's no rules apart from what the blockchain allows, right? Apart from what the technology allows and incentivizes. There's really no rules in steemit, and the only real rules are what the network decides in a decentralized way. So literally you have groups of people who will impose their values and their rules on you, and then you have other people who turn a blind eye and they believe in live and let live, and this is what the consensus allows. And there's people who will define abuse of the system with certain things we all agree on them, and then with other things we don't agree. I don't know how sustainable these models are, because I mean, you really can have certain people do so much abuse of a system that the whole system goes bad. If you have a bad apple in a barrel, the whole barrel goes rotten, right? So I kind of feel like in a decentralized system, you kind of have to hold people accountable to certain values that the whole network decides is good for the system, right? Because in a centralized system, we live and let live, right? But we're basically able to do that because we have central authorities who take care of that shit for us. Whereas we don't have that in a decentralized system. We have people who decide to do it for themselves, right? So we have, on Steemit, we have steam cleaners, right? And that's just one example. I think we have other groups as well that do or don't have a name. I mean, there's the Scammer Patrol, who's actually just Bernie and his cronies. You know, groups of people who basically go around imposing their own rules on the system. Is there a way that this system can actually work, this system of anarchy, or does it have to be split up into different societies so that the society you're in actually agrees on what the rules should be? Because it's kind of crazy the way it is.
I hate to be devil's advocate here. I hate anarchists. You know, I hate the true anarchists who want everything to be free, but then complain about centralization. Now, fundamentally, anarchy is not a way of life. It's a fundamental inside of you. I think it's a way that you think. It can't be a way of life, because under anarchy, centralization can happen, and it's completely okay for it to happen, because under anarchy, anyone can do everything, and it's a self-governed type of law out there. Now, with that being said, steemit, or the whole ecosystem, is anarchistic in model, right? It's a free-for-all. The problem is people want decentralization when they see centralization, but you can't have true decentralization without having centralized points. Not one, not two, but a lot of them working cohesively together. But again, anyone who wants an anarchistic model or is an anarchist, this is it right here. This is anarchy in its best form. People doing whatever they want.
It really is. I mean, Paulus says it as well. If you have enough power, you can basically do what you want. The only people who are really policed are the people with no power.
For me, I think anarchy will work great on paper, but in practicality, I think it's an impossible task. I've seen how team has matured or is approaching maturity, if it's ever would achieve that, and it's not a pretty picture. Because everybody, wants to do whatever is best in their own interests, and that's the problem with anarchy for me. Is that everyone, I don't care how noble you are in your own cause, your self-interest will always be priority to you, and that's just human nature. Anarchy is great on paper, very, very good on paper, but in actual reality, I'm yet to see it actually work. And anarchy, they are too focused on what the government is. Everything is the government this, the government that, blah, 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 blah. And you give them some shit to run and they F it up.
And I don't want to offend any anarchists in the room by saying this, and do speak up and argue, think steemit isn't a good example, but steemit seems to prove the ways in which anarchy doesn't work.
I don't think steemit proves that it doesn't work. I just think that steemit is a very good model that shows that people really don't know what they're talking about when they say they want an anarchistic society. I don't think they understand that means there's no rules, and the only rules are imposed by self-governance. And a lot of people always want to be anti-establishment. A new problem that's generating is, let's forget about being anti-establishment for a minute and let's start realizing that there's a whole bunch of other secret groups that are popping up that are pretty much just as powerful as the establishment and doing whatever they want. Because we still have this kind of thinking where it's like, oh, let's point at the quote-unquote government for all our problems, but then you have all these private companies doing all their things, and they're the ones that are actually harming, right? I don't think it's steemit Inc. creating all these bots and these boosters and things like that. It's these private corporations in a sense. So I think steemit is a great model to show that anarchy is not what's needed. It's a mixture of centralization with decentralization, and that's pretty much how it's going to work. And again, if anyone says that they want a full anarchistic society, well, shit, this is it, and it's awesome, right?
I do think that a lot of anarchists are mistaken in thinking that living in an anarchist society means not having a government. It definitely means not having a central government, but government as in the original sense of the word, not necessarily an institutionalized establishment or anything, but just a system of governance. Like, that would still exist in an anarchist society. It would have to. If it's not that, it's just chaos. That's not a society at all.
I think what anarchy is when you have a group, let's say we have 5 groups of people, right? And then there's, a main group that says, all right, here's anarchy. And anarchy means that you can self-govern yourself. So if you have bad apples, pick them out yourself and da-da-da-da. That's anarchy is merely maybe the start of building a society. And anarchy really just alleviates them of having to be governed by a higher power. It gives them the power to govern themselves. But anarchy should stop right there, and then that's when the centralization and decentralization balance should come in between people and groups and their whole what they want to do. Everyone's going to have their agenda. It's all about matching agendas up. It's not about saying, oh, that person has an agenda. Find out their agenda, see if it works with the group, and if it doesn't, well then, in an anarchistic model, you all come together to make maybe a more clear decision on what you're going to do with that person. But if you just leave it up to the word anarchy, then that person is actually in the right, because there is no right or wrong in anarchy, because everyone can do what they want. So I think anarchy is a fundamental that a group of people or person should start with, but then pressing forward, there should be checks and balances in that system, because unchecked, it's just as bad as, the worst thing out there.
steemit definitely shows a lot of holes